Jeremy Sandoval is a former United States Army paratrooper and combat medic. He deployed and support military operations in the Balkans, Afghanistan, and Iraq. I am so excited to introduce to you on this Veterans Day 2020 the father of my children and my favorite combat veteran, Jeremy Sandoval. Right. Well, welcome back, everyone. Today I have a very special guest with me in honor of Veterans Day, 11/11 2020. It is my husband, Jeremy Sandoval. So I would love to just bring him on and discuss a little bit about all things veterans related. So, husband, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
My name is Jeremy. I'm an only child. Grew up in a really small town in northern New Mexico. Um, my whole family has always been somewhat military affiliated. My dad was in the National Guard. Uncle, great uncle, fought in World War Korea, World War II. My great grandpa fought in World War One. So there's always been a sense of, I guess, like duty, you can say, to serve in the military. So after graduating in 2000, uh, I enlisted, and kind of that just started the journey.
Okay. So why don't you tell us what it is, your MOS? So your what does MOS stand for again these days? I don't remember, but whatever MOS stands for, tell us what your MOS was, and what your specialty was.
So when I first started out, I was 91 Bravo, which was a combat medic. And then as the years transitioned, the MOS changed as we became more advanced. So basically, I was a medic with advanced trauma skills. So short story, I was a medic.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you forgot the bigger. What's the Maroon Beret behind you? What are all those? What does
So
that
uh,
signify?
so the recruiter tricked me into becoming a paratrooper. They got me with the $150 a month for every time you jump Floyd, but it's actually just an extra $150 a month. But I ended up going to jump school after finishing my medical training, and I served for 16 years as a paratrooper between the 18th Airborne Corps and the 82nd Airborne Division.
Okay. And for those of you at home who are not familiar with paratroopers, it's not just jumping from airplanes, but as a spouse to a paratrooper, imagine back in like early 2000s when we didn't have cell phone communication and the best thing you had was calling me from the unit or the office, the company afterwards, just so that I knew that you were safe. So there was like hours on end where your spouse would go for jumping out of an airplane and you wouldn't hear anything and you have no idea if he landed okay, if he made it okay, if the weather looks bad outside, if they actually jumped at all. Sometimes it's 5 hours later and he calls and he's like, it was scratched. And I'm like, but you were there for 5 hours. So what the hell did you do? So it's a lot of anxiety inducing. I know, it was fun, but it was anxiety inducing and definitely not something that I did myself. So we'll go back a little bit and just say that like so Jeremy and I did meet in the army. We met while we were training in Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas. And we were one of those rushed marriages and I guess, it worked out for us. We fell head over heels for each other and it all kind of worked out, right?
Yes, it did. It definitely was rushed,
Yes.
but everything worked out great.
Yeah, married very young, but 19 years strong. So I'm pretty damn proud of that. But anyways, so I actually have, actually before we go into it, why don't you just tell us a little bit about the different places that you were stationed at? People say, "Oh, you join the military, you see the world." That's bullshit. So let's tell them the real down and dirty truth of where you've been.
Well, for me, once you became a paratrooper and you went on jump status, there were very few places where you go. And for us, Fort Bragg, North Carolina is the epicenter it's the home of the airborne, home of special operations. So once you go on jump status and you get your wings, you're either going to Bragg or you're going to Bragg. So I spent what was it, 12 years in Fort Bragg, and then
Mhm.
managed to get away for 4 years. But between that, I deployed to Kosovo, Albania, Serbia, spent a little bit of time in Macedonia, then deployed to Afghanistan, and then final deployment was to Iraq. So didn't exactly get to see all the lovely places that other people get to, but and the experience was definitely worth it. The skill sets that were learned and kind of those bonds that you make throughout deployments, especially in combat environments, or certain bonds that you'll never build within like a civilian type of atmosphere, I feel.
Mhm. Mhm. So for those who are not familiar with our relationship, Jeremy and I got married a month before September 11th happened. So we got married on August 12th, 2001, and then September 11th happened. So Jeremy was stationed in Fort Bragg, I was stationed in Fort Drum, New York, and Uncle Sam was not interested in bringing the two of us together, even though there's a clause or whatever in the military that says with dual military couples have to live within 50 miles radius of each other. We were like 900. And then Jeremy deployed to Kosovo, and then finally he came home, and then we started our family, and then after that, we had Jaden, and you went to Afghanistan when Jaden was like a year old. And then you came home. So that was Jaden was a K43B baby, so Kosovo baby. And then you came home after Afghanistan, and then Celeste was an OEF baby post deployment. They're all post deployment babies. And then you ended up leaving again for Iraq for OIF for when she was a year old. So both the kids you ended up leaving for when they both turned a year. So Jane was a year, and then you left for what 8 9 months, I think it was. And
Yeah, we
then
did 9 months.
yeah, and then with Celeste, you were Celeste and Jaden. Now after Celeste was born, you left when she was a year old, and then returned 15 months later. So that was like our longest and hardest deployment of all. But I do have to say, like as an army wife, one of the best things we had, and I think maybe it's very like group specific, but I think one of the best things we had was the FRG, the Family Readiness Group, where the wives or the spouses, it didn't, well, I guess in your case, it was all males, right, who were deployed. But the
Mhm.
spouses who were behind, we ended up having a family readiness group. And one of my family readiness, my FRG leader was Kanani Thaxton. So her husband was deployed with you over there. And then we kind of like, as wives over here, created our little special group. So it was Kamani, Melissa, Tamika, and then even Michelle from time to time would join us. And so we had like a nice little small knit group that we created with all of you guys deployed over there. So that was kind of interesting, but that really helped us. I mean, for anybody out there who's a military spouse, I think creating those strong bonds was really important because as wives, we made it a point to visit each other and do potlucks every other week. I think it was either every other week or once a month. And so we switched it between whose house it was. And we kind of didn't judge each other. We didn't care if each other's houses were dirty. We know we all had little kids. And so we just wanted to enjoy each other's company and have each other to speak to and say, well, how's your husband doing? And kind of bounce ideas off of each other. And it really, really helped us as wives of soldiers in combat as well. But okay, so when I had recruited you for this Veterans Day special, I also reached out to family members for questions as well. So I have some questions, from different family members, and so I'll start asking a few of them, and I'm going to try and go in some kind of order. So a question that Easy had asked you, it may be easier, Emma. How old were you when you joined the army?
I was 18. I had just turned 18 in August, and I actually left that September. Oh, no, it wasn't September. November is when I actually left. So
Okay. And another one of the questions the Easy asked was looking back, would you have joined it at that age or would you have waited?
I think it definitely helped me mature more, join it at that early of an age, because even after just basic training and going home, like for Christmas holiday when we had a little bit of block leave, even though I was only there for not even a month, it was completely different going back because you kind of had a different mindset at that point where
Hmm.
it wasn't the kind of, I don't know if you could say childish games or, the teenage 18, you're on your own finally and
Mhm.
out wanting to explore. But for me, I was already, I guess you can say, given a purpose, and I had a task or something that I knew that that was my objective. Like most people will go to college or they'll take that year off and not really know what they wanted to do. But for me, it was all right. Everything was already set out. So kind of having that structure of A, you go to basic training, B, you go to learn your skill. If you go on like I did to become a paratrooper, you have an additional skill, then you go to a unit and you actually start working within your job versus going to
Mhm.
college, spending 4 years learning something and not getting any experience and then getting thrown out, having to try to gain that experience. So
Yeah.
in hindsight, I think I would have still joined at that age.
Yeah, yeah. And it scares the shit out of me because Jaden is 17 and, less than a year from now, when you were his age, less than a year from now, you would have joined the army and same with me. But then I'm looking at him like he wouldn't be ready. Like the army would kill him. Like it would really like
Yeah.
it wouldn't be good for him. So it really scares me to think that like, wow, we were really, really young and our parents just kind of allowed us to follow what our passion was and let us do our thing. But that is really, really scary. Now being the parents in that situation, I can only imagine like what your parents went through being the only child and then getting deployed one after another during wartime. How scary that was for them. So that's definitely as a parent now and having kids starting to follow not necessarily follow the path that we are, but like going into their adulthood, it scares me because I just don't know how our parents did it. All
Yeah.
right. So one of the questions that your mom wanted to ask was whether or not you asked if God could please help us all to get you home safe and to help guide you to safety when you were either in training or at war anywhere but home? Were those types of questions that you would ask yourself or pray?
I think for pretty much all of us, you kind of have that kind of like the coming to Jesus moment, you could almost say. I mean, there's a big difference when you're stateside and it's training, but when you actually deploy and I mean, the first time you actually go out on a patrol or something like that, and you're always looking to. I mean, everybody had their little, I guess you could say, rituals or their um, like good luck charms or a certain thing that we did before you left the wire. So yeah, I think there was
Mhm.
quite a few times where you definitely did look for some type of spiritual guidance or some protection. And I mean, there were situations where we had, and it was just like something had to be looking out for us for nothing crazy to have happened that could have gone bad. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think there's always that that looking at something a little bit higher.
Mhm. Um, did you always want to be, and this is from your mom, where you knew you could help other people in need? How do you feel about all of your accomplishments?
I think while growing up as kind of the only child, you kind of always, and then me being the older cousin on my mom's side, it was always having to look out for the little kids. So I think it was kind of just, and then I mean the Hispanic heritage and background, it's always the older people. The older one is always having to look out for the younger. So for me, when decided to become a medic, I think there was always that want to help people, but I don't think it was really that strong in my mind at
Mhm.
the age of 18 or 19. I think I was just more like, I want to get out, I want to go see stuff, I want to do things. But then as I deployed, like my first time to Kosovo, where we were running, kind of doing the humanitarian missions as well, and then interacting with the population and actually seeing the benefit that we were doing, not only from like a medical standpoint, but from infrastructure and rebuilding
Mhm.
places, that definitely kind of prompted me to want to do more and kind of that nurturing side. And then after having kids, and
Mhm.
once we had Jaden and I deployed to Afghanistan, I mean, that things were completely different when you're treating kids, or when we had some casualties that would come in that were children. I mean, it
Mhm.
hits differently when you're working on adults versus kids. So
Right.
yeah, I think overall, I'm proud of what I did. I wish I could have done a lot more, but
Yeah.
I mean, I think in the long run, what I did, I was pretty happy with.
Yeah. Well, we're very proud of you too, husband. And I'm glad you touched on that as well with the children and after having kids of your own and how your perspective changed as well. I think a lot of times people don't realize that our soldiers, our troops go to war not just to fight a battle and kill bad guys. Like that's not our whole objective at all. Oftentimes, we're doing humanitarian stuff as well, and we're working with the locals, and we're training the locals, we're treating the locals. And so, without going into too much detail, I guess, can you touch on a little bit about the humanitarian side of what you did do when you were deployed as well?
And so we would do, they were called med caps. So basically, we would set up day clinics, stuff like that, for the local villages or the small little communities that we were working around. And it was basic healthcare. I mean, if you came in, we would treat whatever we could. Um, it was so like military terms, it was sick calls. So it was just your general medicine type things that we would do,
Right.
preventive medicine,
Like
give
urgent
out.
care, fast clinic, like fast track clinics type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we would mostly treat, I mean, a lot of the stuff that we would see, it was just chronic issues that have been going on for so long. So it was more of just trying to provide comfort and some education. So,
Mhm.
I mean, a lot of the stuff we did too just wasn't strictly focused around the medical aspect. I mean,
Right,
we
yeah.
would go through and help with their sanitation needs. We would teach them like proper types of hygiene and stuff that they could do to help just stop a lot of the communicable stuff that could be easily
Mhm.
maintained. So
Yeah. So that's exactly what I want you to do with me I want to say when I say let's go on missionary work so that we can do those things. But I know you say you've had enough of it. But maybe one day I'll be able to convince you. Um, your dad wanted to know, do you feel that being a soldier and member of an elite army team made you more alert and more appreciative of what you have become and accomplished as a husband and father?
I think it definitely has, because in the end, it all comes back to family and having that strong support group. Because I mean, deployments are rough, especially like for me, my last deployment was probably one of the roughest deployments that we had. And just being able to come back home and know that you have that kind of sense of structure and everything around you helps considerably.
Hmm. Another question from the mama kids. If you could change one thing about your experience, what would it be?
Let me see one thing.
Or multiple.
I think if there was one thing that I would change, I probably wouldn't have gotten out of the military the first time, because I actually did take that 1 year break. And
Mm-hmm.
I think had I continued on with what I had anticipated and wanted to do and not taken that 1 year break, I mean, where we ended up could have been changed quite drastically.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, taking that 1 year off, definitely, it made me realize that there are no matter how many bad days there were in the military, there's still the benefits of having
Yeah.
that. I mean, the healthcare, I mean,
Uh-huh.
you kind of don't really think about it until it's gone. It's like
Right.
being able to have those holidays or those 4 day weekends, and then when you're working back in the civilian side, and oh no, you work every other holiday. There's no such thing as getting a 4-day training holiday or anything like that. So when my buddies would call me up and they're like, "Hey, we have a 4-day weekend. What are you doing?" And at the time I was working at a hospital. I'm like, "Well, I'm working this weekend. I'm not off." They're like, "Oh, well, hit me up when you're off, I guess."
Yeah.
So
Yeah, there are some perks, huh? And the kids and I wanted to know if you could do it all over again, would you do
yeah, I think I would, with the minor changes here and there. But
it?
like I said, getting out that for that 1 year, I think kind of changed things
Yeah.
drastically.
So, from your perspective and your experience, if somebody were to approach you and say, "Hey, Jeremy, I know you served in the army. I'm very interested. I'm graduating high school in 2 months or whatever." What would you tell them? What is the advice you would give them regarding the military interest that they have?
I would tell everybody to get a degree first. I mean, the difference between being enlisted and commission is just night and day. I
Hmm.
mean, being enlisted was great, but then when you end up having to work for somebody that just because they went to college, they're now in charge of you, but they had none of those experience or none of the actual time in a unit, having to work with somebody like that, it was
Difficult.
it was difficult, yeah.
Yeah.
But definitely I would go to college, get a skill, get a degree because it pays. Even if you decide that you don't want to become an officer, that still helps
Hmm.
with your promotions and stuff like that. And
Right.
for a lot of us, I mean, the Army tells you, or any branch of service is like, we'll pay for your school, you'll get the chance to go to college and everything. And I mean, granted, when we came in, September 11th happened, and I mean, our generation of
Hmm.
service member, basically, for our entire careers, was spent in combat environments. So I don't know, maybe had it been a different time where there wasn't a conflict, maybe, yeah, you could have gone to college and
Hmm.
got to go and do all this stuff. But I think being able to secure at least even at a minimum, a 2-year degree or
Hmm.
some type of degree definitely will give you a huge step forward
Right.
in the military side.
Yeah. I would definitely agree with you 100%. I think, like, and that's the advice we give our kids. Hey, if the military is something you're interested in doing, get your degree first. And actually, when we went to dinner tonight, and, I mentioned that to the kids as well, and that was definitely one of the topics. Celeste was saying some of her friends were interested in going straight into the military and they wanted to go to school. As a result, they're going to have that paid for. And I said, I don't know if things have changed, but back in the day, like, that's the discretion of the commander. And my commander flat out told me that my English 101 class was not medically related. Therefore, he denied it. And so, really, if you have a subpar commander, you're going to have some major roadblocks along the way too. So getting that degree is 100% really important. And then even what we've lived through with your military career is the different massive push of the military out. They're fast retiring, they're ending contracts, and those who had no backup plan ended up just a civilian and no other idea of what to do next, and so they're just thrown back into civilian life and had no degree to fall back on, none of that nature, and it was difficult. I mean, it was difficult for we saw how difficult it was. Even the ones with the highest degrees, like you had some friends in different high areas that were what were they force retired? They were force retired, and even with the backup degree, like even from our perspective, it kind of sucked seeing them have to go through that, and that the army was just willing to like cut them loose because they were overpowered or overstaffed with troops, and so
Yeah,
for sure.
definitely.
Um, okay, so I think there was okay, maybe no more. Those were all the questions from your family. And your mom wanted to make sure that these were good questions. She's so sweet. So I guess some of the different things that we can discuss is like let's go into the different types of veteran support out there. There's a lot out there, and you've kind of interacted with some of them between school, between the VA, just some of the different things that you're aware of that maybe can help somebody who's a newly uh, retired or newly discharged veteran?
Well, definitely the new ACAP, or I can't remember what they changed it to, but it's the transition workshops that you actually do when you get out of the military.
Mhm.
Those have greatly improved from the first time when I got out. I mean, when you got out, when was it, 2004 or 2003? No,
2005
2004,
ish.
2005.
Yeah.
I mean, it was kind of good luck, here's your discharge, and that
Hmm.
was it. But now when we actually separated and got out this last time, I mean, there was a plethora of seminars you can go to. There was briefings constantly going around. A lot of the universities now they have actual veterans like support groups, but there's
Hmm.
actually a dedicated veteran liaison at a lot of the universities now.
Hmm.
So my recommendation is if you're applying to a university or you're currently enrolled, I mean, these guys definitely are someone you should be speaking to. Like in my case, being a veteran, we get early access to our classes
Hmm.
a couple days before everybody else. So that helps drastically when you're trying to get that schedule that works for you versus having to wait and fight with everybody else within the university for those classes.
Hmm.
There's, I mean, Military One Stop has always provided quite a bit of information and good resources. Any VA hospital, I mean, even your VFWs, Legions, American Legion, a lot of
Hmm.
these places, there's a lot of support for the veteran community, but then also there's certain groups, combat veterans, CVMA, I was a member of for a while, the Combat Veterans Motorcycle Association. So there is, I mean, a lot of different organizations that are set up out there, and it's as easy as just a Google search sometimes.
Hmm.
But that veteran community, especially even more so, I want to say on the combat side, and you come across guys that may have been in your unit back during Desert Storm, but because you both came from that unit and you have that history of, well, you were Desert Storm, I may have been OIF, OEF, New Dawn, all these different conflicts later on, but there's definitely that bond right away. So, I mean,
Hmm.
there's plenty of stuff to that you can
Yeah.
reach out to out there.
And so I just wanted to touch on this little sensitive topic a little bit. But there's just, lots of stuff in the news about veteran suicide. And, what would you, if you could just put one message out there into the world to your brothers and sisters who have served in combat or who have suffered from post-traumatic stress one way or another that's service related, what can you say? What do you have to say to them?
Well, for me, it actually, I mean, that hits close because I've had three close friends that ended up dying from, I mean, suicide. And I mean, the only thing I can say is, I mean, there's that stigma that we kind of, I mean, when you come from the units that I was with, there's that very alpha male. You have that alpha type personalities because, I mean, is all we really were training for was deployments and training. So you really didn't want to, if, I mean, they could smell that weakness. If you're a brand new guy coming into a unit and you're getting thrown basically to the wolves and you don't want to portray that kind of that weakness or open up. So I think that's one of the biggest problems is for us is that we're just so used to being that alpha type that nothing bothers us that we just I mean you push it, you hide it, you bury it, and then after a while, I mean you can only bury it for so long. So I mean I've always told my guys that no matter what, I mean I may not be in, we may not talk for a while, but I'm always there no matter. I mean, if you need
Mhm.
something, a reference, you just need to talk. I mean, there's so many platforms to reach out. And I think I wish a lot of our friends or my buddies that they would have reached out. And I think it's just because we're just so used to that type of lifestyle where that you show that little bit of
Mhm.
weakness and then it's just like, well, how do you maintain that? So I think that's the biggest problem right there is just the stigma behind it and reaching out.
Yeah, yeah. So pick up a phone and call. Yeah, and that's important. So thank you for that message. But is there anything else that you wanted to add, just put out there to the world in regards to Veterans Day, veteran related things, combat related things?
I think pretty much the biggest thing is like what you already talked about. I mean, the big thing that we're facing is I like the veteran suicide. And I mean, it's great that you see these push ups, 22 push ups, and all that. But I mean, it's great that you're doing some push ups. But I mean, it works more if you, I mean, just shoot out a text or a message to someone. I mean, there's times when I'll just randomly get a message from someone, or I'll message someone and be like, hey, how's it going, man? Just checking. I
Mhm,
sometimes that little message from someone can just completely change what they're going through.
mhm.
And I think the biggest thing is, I mean, just check in on your guys. I mean,
Yeah.
for me, I mean, a lot of my friends, we may not speak for years at a time, but when you do happen to bump in or a random message, I mean, it may be like one of my buddies, he's a Padres fan and I'm a Dodgers fan. So, I mean, no matter how much crap I give him and everything, I mean, it's always kind of like that brotherly, like back and forth. And I think the one thing I saw was your military friends will talk shit to you in your face no matter what, but they'll always talk good about you behind your back versus other people will talk nice to you in front of your face and talk shit about you behind your back. So,
Yeah, wow. I definitely have to agree. I think even just the short bit that I was in the army, I feel like those are the friends that I do have close relationships with. I still talk. I mean, gosh, I still talk to Ceci from time to time. So
mhm.
those types of bonds, even though all we did was go through training together, it was enough to tie us together for life. And so I agree. It doesn't have to be wait until somebody is at rock bottom to contact you because they probably will never make that phone call or that message, send that message. But also check in on your friends. That's equally important as well. And, if you're having a good day, that's the best time to do it because the next time you might be having a bad day, hopefully your friend, some stars align and whatever the case is, and they just know that's the right moment that they should be reaching out to you as well. And so it goes both ways
Hmm.
for sure. All right. Well, thank you so much, babe.
Yep, you're
It
welcome.
was a wonderful interview. Thank you so much. I love you.
Okay, love you too.
Bye.
Thanks.